Go.
Hi, this is Michael Lee. This past weekend, I got second place, almost first place, at the Arkansas Regional with Marincess. This will be a more in-depth dive into the deck, ratios, and the theory behind it.
All right, let's get into it.
So this is the main deck on the top. I just laid it all out. Uh, I'll explain more after you guys get a good look. Underneath is the extra deck over here and the side deck. Main deck is 40 cards, 15-15, and the extra inside as usual. So let's talk about some of the ratios. For starters, this deck performed really well. I was the only player undefeated going into the last round, and I only lost the last round, so the person I lost to got first. I do think this deck is really good. I'm not trying to dodge matchups. This deck can win against Cash Tira, and this deck can also win against Cash even when going second, even if there's Shifter involved. I'm not trying to dodge anything. This deck is good. So for the ratios, we've got, I believe, 15 Marincess monsters. This is definitely a little bit more than the 12 that people used to play some years ago. You want to play more monsters just because consistency. We do not play silent mining because in the current format, mining is good because it gets you blue tang, and blue tang gives you additional value in the combo, but mining also has issues where you never really want to discard a card. This isn't Salmon Great, where the discard, like, you don't go neg 1 on mining. This deck does go like neg 1. And mining is also not very great when you're under shifter, when you're under a lot of pressure in this very diverse format. The other thing that's interesting to note, Mandarin's at 2, because Mandarin is a good card. I'm not playing 3 because it is one of the worst of the starters that you can have, and I think I do have enough monsters in the main. I also only run one Sleepy Maiden and one Basil. I know some people do not like these cards because they're bricks, but I feel like the utility that they offer, you need to have the option for them. So this lets you equip to Argonaut, which is really important because in certain combos where you have to search Dive, you can't search Battle Ocean. This is the only way to get you the Link 4 with the spell and Trap Negate. I am not that big of a fan of Great Bubble Reef, which I know a lot of players are, simply because while it does draw 1, in Yu-Gi-Oh! When you draw 1, it's inferior to just having a negate. You're not guaranteed to draw a hand trap, and if you draw a combo piece, you're not able to use that combo piece until next turn. In Yu-Gi-Oh! When it comes to tempo, you want to be able to use your cards for your combo in this turn, immediately. Right? Tactics is insane because you draw 2, and the cards you draw can be used into your combo. You don't want to draw 2 and wait for next turn to use it. So continuing on, I also play 2 Dive and 2 Battle Ocean. This can be cut to 1, but I'm playing 2 because I just value the grind. This card lets Argonaut be very insane, gives your Marincess monsters a lot of attack, and if you do open this, you can search Dive as well, so it doesn't really impact your combo unless they hard stop you. And also play 3 Wave. There are some Marincess lists that have been successful with 3 Wave. Some people have been asking why the 3 Wave. Marincess is a deck that's main strength is going first, so its weakness is going second. This is just capitalizing on that strength. Wave is also a interesting going second card, because one thing that Marincess tends to do is they go wide with their board. Going wide means they summon a lot of one-of monsters. You summon 1, 2, 3. Your board will have like 4 monsters. Your opponent will probably think to pop your monsters once you go into the Link 2 or higher. But what you do is, if you have Wave in hand, you immediately go into a Link 3, and then Wave can negate some of the monsters on their field, such as like a Mirror Jade. So that is all the engine I play. I play 4 pot cards. I know this can also be a little bit confusing because they conflict with each other, but as far as the ratios go, you shouldn't be drawing 2 copies of a 4 of. Additionally, these cards are like really good. I know people, the default is to play Desires because draw 2 is good. You also don't want to banish your extra deck, which is why people don't play Prosp. The reason why I do play Prosp is because a lot of the cards in your extra deck are utility. You're forced to play the utility because when the situations come up, you must have that card in order to win the situation. But the situation won't always come up. hence why it's a utility. So depending on the game state, you have to use critical thinking to determine what card you're probably not going to need in this game and banish those off. Another reason why I play Prosp is because I'll get into later. This deck has a couple of like, it's like an Achilles heel weakness, where it just loses. I would just call it cheese, but you need props to search for your outs. For the staples, we've got the hand traps, 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, 2 Veiler, 2 Nibiru. The Veiler Imperm Ashes are just good for generic, and the 2 Nibirus just slot in because it's the closest thing to a generic compared to the other options right now. Do not have room in the main/side for the 3rd Veiler. I also play 3 Book of Moon. This card is much better going first than it is going second. The only exception to this rule is this card is decent going second against Kashtira, and that's why I'm playing this card. If Kashtira wasn't a deck, this card wouldn't be in my deck. Going second, this card really isn't that good, but Cash is a prevalent matchup, and this deck does struggle against macro, so we play the books. Going to the extra deck, these should all be standard. You have to play the Crystal Heart, you can't cut it. Coral Triangle, standard. Some people play 2 Zelantis, but the second Zelantis will never come up. You can watch a dozen of deck profiles, the second one just doesn't. For people that are scared of Unicorn, Unicorn banishing for extra deck doesn't actually come up that often, and if it does often, you have to play the percentage game. Everything is a probability, so just take the loss in that case. Or sometimes if they only have Unicorn, that probably means they don't have a Rice Heart, so you might not even need this Atlantis, you can push through elsewhere. The 1 Vomit Shark and Toad, I know some people cut this package. I play it because it maxes out your end board. The maximum end board with this deck is an Argonaut that is made using Crystal Heart with Field Spell on field with a Toad and the Trap in hand. That is the maximum end board. Not in addition to your Link 4 being unaffected, you also have the Toad for the additional negate. Another good thing about the Toad in the end board is that Marincess sorta has like a going first checkmate when going first, because their trap is an Imperm which stops monster effects, but all of their extra deck monsters are spell and trap negates. So in addition to locking their monsters, you also lock their spell and traps, which is like a near checkmate. Additionally, the Imperm only affects cards on field. So in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's sort of this duality where some decks use effects on field, some decks use effects in grave. The Imperm doesn't hit decks in grave, but that's where Toad comes in. So let's say if you're against Unchained and use an Unchained effect from hand, you can Toad, negate, and then it will steal the Unchained card, so it won't be able to trigger its effect. So they have to open it out to Toad, or else their combo's going to get stopped. So Toad does cover some of the holes that the deck might have. I also played the Kraken. This card is not good in the end board. This card only comes up against Shifter or macro situations, because the detach doesn't require to send anything to grave. It doesn't even detach for effect, and you can just have an interruption under Shifter. You can normal summon Pascalist, especially on the level 4 from hand, and end on this, especially against Cash. The Toad has to send to grave in order to negate, so Vomit Shark under Shifter doesn't particularly work. Now for the side deck, we have 2 Bell, 2 Ogre. These are just really solid hand traps. Bell is probably the best card against Labyrinth, probably better than Feather Duster even. And Ogre is also just a good hand trap against Pearly, Runic, or Sprite. This, I would say, is the best card in my side deck, because in a format so diverse, playing the Siphon package effectively decreases the size of your side deck because they're generic. You can throw them into every single matchup. And because they're generic, you now have like a baseline coverage for every matchup. So you essentially give yourself more room in the side by just playing the Gamma package. Or like, since Gamma's limited, we play Delta. A lot of decks do rely on spells, and with the way Delta doesn't feel good, because if the opponent is able to play through the Delta, then it feels like you're going to lose. But that's always been the case. Like, even if you use a Gamma, the opponent could play through it and it still feels bad. You just have to play to like your best percentages, especially when going second, which is already a losing position, to which I feel like Delta gives you a good shot at winning. It even came up in Labyrinth matchups, because they play pots and so forth. Additionally, there's the 2 Skullmeister. It is for Unchained. It can feel a little bit weird to play a card just for one matchup in this diverse format, but again, when I talked about the duality of decks that activate on field versus decks that activate in grave, Skullmeister and Ghost Spell are just sort of like the cards that lock the cards in grave. So if you're up against like Tearlament, Skullmeister is still good. So decks that use Graveyard, Skullmeister is still fine. It's not just for Unchained, but Unchained is definitely a deck that introduced the idea of playing Skullmaster again. And then to finish off, the 3 Cosmic and the Feather Duster. I do not like these cards. You are forced to play these cards in this deck because once again, this deck has an Achilles heel. In this case, it would be Floodgates. There can only be one Necro Valley, Macrocosmos, Dimension Fisher, Layer of Darkness. If any of these cards are on field, the engine has no outs to those cards, and your engine cannot resolve or win any sort of beatdown. You automatically lose. So you have to play an out to a Floodgate, whether you like it or not. The reason why I don't like those cards is because Cosmic is not that good of a card going second. It's a great card going first because you can flip it against Kashtira, against her field spell, and all sorts, and other different matchups too. It's also, I guess it's okay against Unchained when you go first, but in my opinion, it's better to side cards for going second and rely on your engine for going first. But because of the Achilles heel, you have to play the Cosmic, which only comes up going second against those Floodgates, but otherwise just a going first card. And the Feather Duster is just an overall decent, I guess, blowout. It's only good when the game is not very decisive. It's pretty chaotic, and you just get free plus. Didn't come up too much this weekend, but that is the overall breakdown. So for some more in-depth analysis, against D-Shifter, this deck has a pretty good plan. That's part of the reason why you play the 3-wave. Under Shifter, you can't go into your typical combo, but you want to set up disruptions, because essentially what Shifter does is they go neg1 to stop you for 1 turn. So if you can set up some form of disruptions, survive the turn, and play on turn 3, then you have better chances against Shifter. So against Shifter, we've got a total of all of these cards right here is what you use against Shifter when you're going first against Kashtira. They Shifter you set any of these cards. You can, if you open this, you make the link 1, search for a spell that you can use next turn, and then set the wave, and you're fine. If you open Pascalis, you can summon a level 4 from hand, overlay into Kraken, and then you have a pop 1. So you can immediately pop the monster that they special summon, and hopefully their hand won't be strong enough to play through it, which is really what you're trying to aim for, which is the percentages. This did come up this weekend. I was against Cash, I got Shifted, and I just made the Kraken. And he summoned 1 monster, popped it, and didn't have anything left. And we just went to top decks. And I was able to win at the end. But this is all the ammunition we have against Shifter. Shifter is not an auto loss. And yeah. Overall, the main Achilles heel for this deck is a Rise Heart, macro on legs, which is why we played the Book of Moon. Additionally, for the prosps, these cards dig for your outs, such as Book of Moon and the Cosmics. If your opponent opens a Floodgate, you prosper 6 and you try to find the Cosmic. If your opponent has a Rise Heart on field, you prosper 6. You try to find the Book of Moon or Imperm. You just do what you're forced to do to win the game. Banishing 6 is never good in the grind. However, when Marincess is losing the game, you're not summoning any card from your extra deck. So rather than leaving your extra deck untouched, just banish 6 and try to save your life, essentially. So far this deck has been really good. If I were to make any changes, there is an idea to stick the Water Charmer into the extra deck, because that'll play around Contact C. I'm not quite sure on the validity of that idea, because Contact C is a 3-of unsearchable. I mean, Shifter is also 3-of unsearchable, but it's a little bit more common than Contact C. If I were to play Contact C, I don't think there's room in my extra, although the big brain play would be to cut 1 Core Anemone for the Water Charmer. It sounds like complete blasphemy, but with this deck, you can recycle any extra card using Blue Slug. You can Blue Slug, target extra card, summon it back. In addition to that, Coral Triangle typically reborns the Core Anemone, so you do have access to it after turn 1 if you only play 1. And just looking at probability in general, not a lot of games end up using the second Core Anemone, because games are pretty decisive nowadays when you're playing it perfectly. So it can be cut, but it just depends on how much you value having a consistent answer to contact C versus just occasionally folding you to it. Another change I could make is cutting Battle Ocean to 1. I was initially against the idea because of the grind, and also because of Pot of Desires. Every Marincess deck is playing Desires, so that's not even a question. But if this gets banished off Desires, you can never equip for your Marincess monsters to become really big and grind. I guess the real question is, when you're going first and you open Desires with combo, do you Desires first or do you combo first? Typically, right now, since I'm playing 2 Battle Ocean, I Desires first to see if I get Pascalis, to see if I could have a different line of starters to start my play by having the 2 cards first. If you only play 1 Battle Ocean, you have to start your combo first and then Desires so that you can get the Battle Ocean out of your deck. It might be the case that in matchups where you need the Battle Ocean, you can afford to Desires after you combo. And for the matchups where you don't need the Battle Ocean, you can Desires first. So that is like it's a very edge case. You really need to know your matchups really well to determine whether you can go for it or not. But yeah, Battle Ocean is not good to open. I'm only playing 2 because of Desires and because of how important it is to search. And the reason why it's not good to open is because even though you can search to dive, if the opponent like flips Book of Moon and stops you from playing, then the Battle Ocean is essentially dead in hand. So yeah, I guess one more thing to cover. To play through, I know books are really popular right now. To play through Book of Moon, that's why I play through Pascalis. On summons one from hand, so you're never locked. If they do, just flip 1 monster face down. Another out to Book of Moon would be like Blue Tang plus Dive, because Blue Tang will mill and then Dive and Reborn, or Blue Tang plus Spring Girl, because Blue Tang will mill, and then even if Blue Tang gets booked, you can Spring Girl from hand to keep playing. So those are just like the extenders in the deck. Overall, this weekend for my matchups, I'm gonna pull it up real fast.
I sort of found like I wasn't focusing on them, but I had a couple cards that would like make them, and every couple of days.
Round 1, I played against Sword Soul. Round 2, I played against Cash. Round 3, I played against Chimera Runic. Round 4, I played against Trap Chicks. Round 5, I played against Furniture Labyrinth. Round 6, I played against Makonko. And in that matchup, I choose to go first. Even though I know it's a going second deck. Because setting Book of Moon is really good against that deck. Setting Cosmic is really good against that deck. Even though Makonko has like targeting protection, if they do normal summon the green Makonko, you can just flip the Imperm before they have the chance to put an equip spell to it. And that would just leave it negated on field. So just know your matchups and it's fine. Round 7, I played against 60 card Branded. And round 8 was against Unchained, which was my only loss. So overall, based on the number of rounds, 8 rounds and 160 people, there was no one undefeated at the end. My record is the same as the person who got first, so I do think this deck did really well. I don't think it was a fluke or anything. I have a lot of faith in the deck.
Any shoutouts?
I mean, as usual, shoutouts to my friends, shout out to my family,
All
shout
right.
out to Pixel Haven in Austin, best local
Yes.
in Texas. I
Yes,
guess
sir.
some closing thoughts. This deck has been blessed by the simulator. The simulator is greater than I. What is the simulator, you might ask? You make 2 dueling book accounts, split window. On one account, you put in the first place YCS Cashier list. On the second account is your deck. And you control both sides, and you just lose for 6 hours straight until you figure it out. Test conditions, you're always losing the die roll. You must side in all copies of Nibiru. If you open Nibiru, the opponent is going to play around it in a Rise Art Pass. If you don't open Nibiru, your opponent's just going to go Shanghai Era and not play around it. And to pass the test, you must win the best of 3.
All right.
And to base confidently. This deck was able to pass the simulator, which is why I brought the deck this week. I haven't played this deck for like about half a year. This includes locals or like any Yu-Gi-Oh events. I did play the deck before, so I knew how to like do the combos and pilot, but I basically had 1 week's worth of time or half a week's worth of time to deck build and figure out the ratios for this format. So I'm pretty proud of that. Last week I topped with Ectosister, and this week I topped with Marincess, so seem to be on a good roll.
All right. What is your next deck that you wanted to play, that you're planning to play?
I'm not quite sure. In my opinion, the premium deck right now is Salmon Great. It's the best deck. Salad is the best deck. I am not worthy of that deck, but I will be playing it one day. And Rescue Ace, after the new support comes out, I do not have a lot of confidence in Rescue Ace right now. I think the deck is good once the Snake Eye stuff is out. Additionally, I also have the option of revisiting Sword Soul. For those who are wondering from my previous deck profile with Sword Soul, if any theory has changed, obviously some staples have changed. Gamma's limited, so you play the Delta. The Sword Soul does not need to play Book of Moon, because they can play under macro just fine. With just one Ariser on field, they're able to push through. Sword Soul does not need to play Cosmic, because they don't get hurt by any Floodgate, and they have outs to Floodgates in their engine, such as Vishuda or Blackout. Additionally, I would play 2 Prosps in Sword Soul in the main deck, in addition to the 2 Desires, for a similar reason for Marincess. It's not really to dig for an out per se, but the way I look at pots is that it's a blank. So right now it's really hard to design a main deck because of how diverse the format is, but by just having a blank in your deck means, it's never going to be bad in any matchup. It's also good against matchups where you don't have much cards to side, like against Labyrinth, or against like a Bestial heavy D-Link deck where hand traps might feel a little bit subpar. Just having a Prosp as a blank ensures that you're at max consistency. And what you banish will depend on the game state. It's a lot of critical thinking. There is no like default flowchart algorithm to go about it. But if you think you have good knowledge of the game and you're a good player, I would definitely suggest playing double pots. Other decks that I'm looking at would be like, I guess, Teller Knights. That deck I know is probably like the most scuffed out of my lineup, but I think they got it.
You think they do?
It's not the best, but it can top, I think. But I mean, I'll probably play Salad or Rescue Ace before that. Still waiting for Rescue Ace for new support. I guess one last thing is please stop power shuffling. I think Konami should ban power shuffling in Yu-Gi-Oh! It is not allowed in MTG as well. If you ever see MTG players power shuffle, it's just to count the number of cards in your deck, but afterwards they are very strict about shuffling your deck thoroughly after the power shuffle. Power shuffling is not randomization. Power shuffling has the potential to weave your deck, mana weaving. That is not good, that is not randomized, and that is not okay. I feel like some of the outcomes or the strength of some decks can be construed by power shuffling, because you get better hands than what you probably should have. Yeah, overall, like I don't blame any player per se. It is like people just don't know, and it's just like accepted as culture, which is why like it would be really nice if Konami could do something about it. Or if, like, I guess if you're a judge and like the ruling of the event is under your discretion, just maybe keep in mind that after power shuffling, they should shuffle properly and thoroughly afterwards. There is actually a study on this. I think I repeated this before, but 7 riffle shuffles is the mathematical for randomization. However, that is for riffle shuffling, like what you see at a casino where they like shuffle like that on your cards. People don't want to do that, which is why we do mass shuffling. That's fine, but mass shuffling isn't going to be perfect form or technique. So if your mass shuffles are not like it's not like perfect technique, you might have to shuffle a little bit more than 7. I know I definitely shuffled like more than 16 times, sometimes like up to 20, as much time as they allow. And I mean, if people look at you funny because like you take a lot of time shuffling your deck, just know that power shuffling is a complete waste of time. And none of my games really went into time to where like it would change the outcome of the game. I did win my games pretty cleanly.
Nice. All right. So congratulations on your back-to-back regional tops, and thank you for the deck profile, sir.